Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're focusing on a case that really shook things up, challenging basic ideas about school safety, who's responsible, and even the legal boundaries in childhood. We're talking about the tragic shooting of first-grade teacher Abby Zwerner.
It's truly a shocking core event. The fact that on January 6, 2023, a 6-year-old student intentionally shot his teacher. That happened at Richneck Elementary School in Newport News, Virginia. It just makes this incident stand out.
Absolutely. And our sources really let us analyze not just the shooting itself, but the profound systemic failures that allowed something so unprecedented to actually occur.
And when you look at the context, it gets even more jarring, doesn't it?
It really does. Statistically, this is just way off the charts. It was the first U.S. school shooting of 2023. Sure, but zoom out a bit.
Yeah.
Since 1970, there have only been six total U.S. school shootings carried out by someone under 10 years old.
16 since 1970. That's incredibly rare.
Exactly. So the age of the shooter immediately forced these really difficult questions about where the real accountability needed to fall.
That's right. And our sources provide, well, almost a forensic look at the background, the truly astonishing timeline of warnings that were just ignored, systematically ignored.
And the legal fallout afterward.
Oh, yeah. A multi-layered legal reckoning. It didn't just target the adult who owned the gun, but also the school officials who, failed to act on those warnings.
So our mission for you today, listening in, is really to unpack that whole sequence. We need to go from the student's troubled history right through to the huge civil judgments and even the criminal charges that came later.
It's a complex story with a lot of moving parts.
Okay, let's start unpacking that history then. The sources begin, logically, with the student himself. This wasn't a kid who just showed up one day and did this out of the blue.
Not at all. His school records, based on the sources, paint a picture of a long and, frankly, escalating pattern of really disturbing prior incidents. It wasn't just typical kid stuff.
Yeah. And documenting that behavior is crucial, right? Because it establishes that the administration knew, or at least they should have known, about this child's potential for violence.
Exactly. It shows awareness, or constructive awareness. The sources confirm this documented history. We're talking cursing at staff, which is serious enough.
But then things like trying to whip other students with his belt.
Right. That's a level beyond.
And it gets worse.
There was that incident back in 2021.
Yes. Extremely concerning. He allegedly choked a teacher, locked his forearms around her neck, pulled her backward. I mean, that's significant physical assault.
And the district's response then?
They moved him to a different school environment. So this indicates high-level administrators were already forced to grapple with his capacity for, severe physical violence against adults.
That is a critical piece of context. The district knew this student could seriously harm staff.
They absolutely did. And that underlying tension just flared up again right before the shooting, in the week leading up to January 6th.
He broke Abby Zwerner's phone, reportedly slammed it and broke it. Yes, just days before.
And the immediate consequence for destroying her property.
A one-day suspension.
One day.
One day. And here's the really chilling part. January 6th, the day of the shooting, was his very first day back in her class after that suspension.
So he returns immediately after being punished for damaging her property to a classroom where staff are already on high alert about his volatility.
Precisely. They knew he was unstable. They knew he just acted out destructively towards this specific teacher.
So given that history and his return from suspension, the weapon coming into play is the final awful piece. What do the sources tell us about the gun itself?
The weapon was identified as a 9mm Taurus Armis G28 pistol. He managed to bring it into the school hidden in his backpack.
And where did it come from?
Crucially, the sources confirmed it belonged to his mother, Deja Nicole Taylor. She had purchased it legally.
Legally purchased. That detail immediately shifts some of the focus, doesn't it? Away from just the child's actions towards the adult responsible for securing a lethal weapon.
It has to. Secure storage, access in the home. These become central questions, especially when a child gets hold of it.
Okay, so we have this trouble history, we have the presence of the gun, and that combination makes the timeline of what happened next just staggering, especially when you look at the civil lawsuit later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't some sudden bolt from the blue crisis. The sources lay out how it was the direct result of catastrophic administrative failure unfolding over just a few hours.
A critical 3-hour window.
A 3-hour window where multiple specific urgent warnings were given directly to school administrators and ignored. That sequence of denial, that's the heart of the systemic breakdown here.
Let's walk through those warnings carefully because the timing is just devastating. The first alert, It came from Abby Zwerner herself.
Yes, she raised the first flag early in that window between about 11:15 and 11:30 in the morning.
And what did she report?
She told officials the student had threatened to beat up another student, a physical assault threat.
Okay, so that's the first formal red flag of the day, a specific threat of violence.
And it should have been seen in context, right? Given his documented history, including choking a teacher previously, this wasn't just playground talk.
Definitely a serious warning. But it was only the first one. An hour later, around 12:30 p.m., the situation escalated.
Dramatically, a second teacher, it seems, acting on her own unease, maybe instinct,
Yeah.
she searched the student's backpack.
She searched it herself.
Threw it upon herself, yes. It's not entirely clear if she found the gun right then, but the key thing is she then went to an administrator, told him what she did, expressed her ongoing concern about this student.
So that shows the anxiety was spreading among the staff. Teachers felt they needed to take action themselves.
It does. They weren't feeling supported, clearly. But the third warning, this is the one that just defies belief, it came shortly before 1 p.m.
What happened then?
A third teacher reported to administrators that the student had actually shown another child a gun during recess.
Shown a gun at recess.
Yes. And not only that, he reportedly threatened to shoot that child if they told anyone.
My goodness. So by 1 p.m., the administration has received 3 separate warnings. Threat of violence, concern leading to a search, and now confirmation from a witness that he has a gun and is making lethal threats.
Correct. 3 distinct warnings, escalating in severity, culminating in direct confirmation of a firearm on school grounds in the hands of this specific, known to be volatile child.
This is the point where everything should have stopped. Lockdown, intervention.
You would think so. But this is where the story turns from just tragedy to, well, documented systemic negligence. Faced with confirmation of a gun, the administrative response was just bafflingly passive.
The sources detail what they were told.
They do. One teacher who passed on that third critical warning, the one about seeing the gun, was reportedly told by an administrator to, and this is a direct quote, the sources cite, wait out the situation.
Wait it out.
Wait it out. Because, quote, the school day was almost over.
Prioritizing the end of the school day over an active, confirmed gun threat? How is that possible?
It's incredibly hard to process. It suggests a deliberate decision to risk it, maybe hope it just went away, rather than follow what should be basic safety protocols. It's a fundamental breach of the duty of care.
And it wasn't just passive waiting. They actively stopped someone from helping.
That's another key point from the sources, yes. Following that third warning, the confirmed gun citing another school employee specifically asked for permission to search the student and his backpack.
And
permission denied. Explicitly denied by an administrator.
So they knew about the gun, they were told to wait, and they refused permission for a search that could have located the weapon.
Correct. That active denial, despite having specific, credible intelligence about a firearm, that became a cornerstone of Abby Zwerner's later civil lawsuit. It points directly to gross negligence.
And we know Abby Zwerner herself knew the danger she was in and felt abandoned by the administration.
Tragically, yes. About an hour before she was shot, she sent a text message. It was to someone unidentified. But in it, she said the student claimed to have a gun.
Claimed to have one.
And she stated very clearly that the administrators were not helping her.
That text is just heartbreaking. It underscores her fear, her awareness, and the administration's. Well, their willful dismissal of the extreme danger she and her students were in.
It's powerful evidence. It shows she recognized the threat, she communicated it, and she perceived the administration as knowingly failing to act. That goes directly to the reckless disregard element needed for gross negligence claims later on.
And sadly, that failure to act led exactly where you'd fear it would, around 2 p.m. during a normal lesson.
The student pulled out the 9mm pistol and pointed it at Abby Zwerner.
Police later confirmed it was intentional.
Yes. Their investigation concluded the shooting was intentional. There was no struggle beforehand, no warning. He just aimed and fired when she apparently reached for the weapon.
Trying to disarm him, even then.
It seems so. The physical impact was immediate and severe. The bullet went straight through her left hand, rupturing bones, and then lodged in her chest.
Her injuries were initially described as life-threatening.
They were. She required intensive care, though thankfully she was released from the hospital later that same month, mid-January 2023. But the immediate aftermath, her actions right after being shot, that's what's truly remarkable.
Even grievously wounded, her first thought wasn't for herself.
Not at all. The sources emphasize her heroism, her extraordinary presence of mind. Despite being shot, bleeding, in shock and pain, her immediate instinct was to protect her students.
She got them out of the classroom.
Every single one. She escorted all her students out of that room and away from the shooter, putting their safety first, even as she desperately needed medical help herself. That level of courage, it really does demand we pause and acknowledge it.
Absolutely. It's easy to just recount the facts, but that action likely saved many children from witnessing or being involved in something even worse.
No question. While she was getting help, someone else on staff managed to restrain the shooter.
Yes, that was Amy Kobach, a reading specialist. The sources say she intervened quickly, restrained the 6-year-old boy, and called 911. She held him there until the police arrived and took him into juvenile detention.
So immediate, decisive action from other staff members on the ground, contrasting sharply with the earlier administrative inaction.
A stark contrast indeed, and the long-term impact on Abby Zwerner. It wasn't just the initial hospital stay. The trauma was physical and psychological and lasting.
Deeply lasting. Testimony during her civil suit, this was in October 2025, revealed something quite shocking. The bullet was still lodged in her chest.
Nearly 3 years later.
Nearly 3 years after the shooting, yes. Imagine living with that constant physical reminder. And beyond the physical.
The psychological toll.
Immense.
Yeah.
As of January 2025, she reported struggling severely with PTSD, with heightened anxiety, with depression, all stemming directly from the shooting. It made returning to her profession essentially impossible.
Which explains her formal resignation.
Yes. She resigned from her teaching position on June 13, 2023. The shooting effectively ended her career at Richneck Elementary. But her fight, the fight for justice and for institutional accountability, was really only just beginning in the legal system.
Okay, this brings us to what you called the most complex part. The legal framework. 3 different strands of potential culpability the system had to navigate.
That's right. You have the child perpetrator himself, you have the mother who owned the gun, and you have the school administration who ignored those critical warnings. Very different legal questions for each.
Let's start with the child. Dealing with a 6-year-old shooter presents a unique legal challenge, doesn't it? What could even be done?
It's incredibly difficult. Because of his extremely young age, his identity was protected by law, and critically, he was not charged with murder.
Similar to a previous case.
Yes, the sources draw a direct parallel to the 2000 killing of Kayla Rowland. She was also killed by a 6-year-old shooter who was also not charged. It's a grim historical echo.
So, if not charged, what happened to the boy in this case?
He was arrested initially, but then immediately placed in a healthcare facility for treatment, for assessment, not in a conventional jail or juvenile detention center.
And the reasoning behind focusing on treatment, not punishment.
Well, legal and psychological experts commenting on the case really emphasize the developmental stage of a 6-year-old. Their moral reasoning, their understanding of consequences, their ability to form criminal intent. It's just not developed like an adult's or even an older child's.
So the consensus was care over incarceration.
Very much so. The discussion centered on acute disability, on the need for compassion, for intensive care, for rehabilitation, not on traditional criminal justice, which isn't really equipped for a perpetrator that young.
Did the family offer any context for his behavior?
They did later state that he had an acute disability and had received an ADHD diagnosis. They also claimed he'd started medication and was meeting academic goals before the shooting, although, now, the documented behavioral history we discussed certainly suggests ongoing serious struggles, regardless of any treatment.
Okay, so the child was placed in care. The legal system then turned its attention squarely to the adults involved, starting with the mother, Deja Nicole Taylor. And she faced charges on 2 fronts.
Yes, a quite unusual dual prosecution. She faced both federal and state charges. And importantly, the sentences ended up being consecutive, meaning she serves them one after the other.
Let's break that down. What were the federal charges related to?
The federal case focused on the gun itself, the acquisition and possession. She pleaded guilty to 2 federal counts in November 2023.
Which were?
First, making a false statement when she bought the gun. This usually involves lying on the background check form, perhaps about drug use or intent. And second, unlawful use of a scheduled drug, specifically marijuana, while also possessing a handgun. That's illegal under federal law.
And the sentence for those federal convictions?
21 months in federal prison.
Okay. Then the state of Virginia stepped in.
Correct. The state focused more on her parental duty of care or the lack thereof, specifically regarding a firearm and her child.
So a child neglect charge.
Exactly. In December 2023, she was sentenced for felony child neglect. The charge stemmed directly from allowing her 6-year-old son to get access to a loaded firearm and obviously take it to school.
And the state sentence.
2 years in state prison.
And these run consecutively.
Yes, that was the crucial part. First the 21 months federal, then the 2-year state. So a total combined sentence of 3 3/4 years behind bars. Her release date is currently projected for May 13th, 2026.
Does she accept responsibility?
The sources do note she made a public statement accepting responsibility for the shooting.
All right, so that addresses the gun owner's accountability. The third legal front, maybe the most complex in some ways, was the push for institutional accountability, led by Abby Zwerner herself. She filed that major civil lawsuit.
A huge lawsuit seeking $40 million in damages. It named the Newport News School Board and several former officials, arguing directly that their multiple failures to act on those specific warnings constituted gross negligence.
And the school district's first move was to try and shut it down entirely.
Immediately, they tried to get the case dismissed, arguing it fell under the Virginia Workers' Compensation Act, the WCA.
Explain that for us. What does workers' comp usually cover, and why did they think it applied here?
Okay, so workers' comp is basically a no-fault system for job-related injuries. If you get hurt at work, WCA provides benefits like medical coverage and lost wages, usually pretty quickly.
But the trade-off is?
The trade-off generally is that WCA becomes the exclusive remedy, meaning if your injury is covered by workers' comp, you typically can't then sue your employer for negligence over the same injury. You take the WCA benefits instead.
So the school district argued being shot by a student was a workplace injury covered by WCA.
That was their argument. They claimed her injuries, however horrific, arose out of her employment as a teacher, and therefore her only recourse was through the WCA system, which she had, in fact, rejected.
But Zwerner's team fought back on that.
Vigorously. Their argument was that this wasn't just a typical workplace risk, like slipping on a wet floor. This was the direct result of administrators intentionally disregarding specific, known, life-threatening danger. They argue this amounted to gross negligence, which can sometimes pierce the WCA's exclusive remedy shield.
Essentially saying the administration's actions or inactions took it beyond a normal workplace accident.
Exactly. They argue the administrator's choice not to act, despite knowing about the gun, made the injury fundamentally different. And the court ultimately agreed with Zwerner.
The court sided with her.
Yes, the judge ruled that being intentionally shot under these circumstances, particularly after the ignored warnings, fell outside the scope of the WCA. The motion to dismiss was denied.
That must have been a massive victory for her case to even proceed.
Absolutely crucial. It allowed the negligence lawsuit to move forward against the individuals and the board. But there was another legal hurdle: sovereign immunity.
Right, the protection for government entities. How did that play out?
Well, sovereign immunity generally shields government bodies, like school boards, and often their employees acting in their official capacity, from lawsuits unless the state explicitly allows it.
So the school board itself got out.
Yes. As the case progressed, the Newport News School Board and 2 of the 3 originally named former school officials were dismissed from the lawsuit based on this immunity principle.
But one administrator remained, Ebony Parker, the assistant principal. How did Zwerner keep the suit alive against her specifically?
This involved a key legal distinction: the difference between discretionary duties and ministerial duties for a public official.
Okay, what's the difference?
Discretionary duties involve using judgment, making policy choices, things generally protected by immunity. Ministerial duties, however, are tasks that are mandatory, required by law or established policy, involving little to no judgment, like processing a form correctly, or crucially here,
Responding to an immediate safety threat according to protocol.
exactly. Zwerner's lawyers argued that ignoring repeated, specific warnings about a firearm wasn't a judgment call. It was a failure to perform a mandatory ministerial duty to ensure student and staff safety based on established protocols. They argued Parker had a duty to act and failed.
And that argument worked to keep Parker in the lawsuit.
It did. It allowed the case against Parker, as the administrator who allegedly received warnings and denied the search permission, to proceed to trial as the sole remaining defendant from the administration.
So the civil trial finally happened, starting in October 2025, and the outcome was clear.
Extremely clear. On November 6, 2025, the Virginia jury returned a verdict strongly in favor of Abby Zwerner. They awarded her $10 million in damages against former assistant principal Ebony Parker.
$10 million, and the jury specifically found.
They specifically found that Parker had ignored those repeated, definitive warnings that this 6-year-old student had a gun. It was a direct affirmation of the gross negligence claim.
A huge civil judgment, but the legal consequences for Parker didn't even end there, did they? There was a criminal case, too.
That's right. The evidence presented, and likely the public pressure, was significant enough that a grand jury took action. In April 2024, even before the civil trial concluded, Ebony Parker was indicted on criminal charges.
Criminal charges? For what exactly?
8 counts of felony child neglect.
Yeah.
The indictment alleged that her actions, specifically ignoring the threats and failing to take protective measures, endangered the students under her care, constituting criminal negligence.
8 felony counts. When was her criminal trial scheduled?
It was set to begin in mid-November 2025, literally just days or weeks after the $10 million civil verdict came down against her.
Wow. So she faced both massive civil liability and serious federal criminal charges for her role in ignoring the warnings. That's a profound level of accountability being pursued.
It really underscores the perceived severity of the administrative failure in this case. The system pursued accountability on multiple fronts.
So the legal framework ultimately held the gun owner and the administrator accountable. What about the institution itself? What immediate changes happened at Richneck Elementary and within the district leadership?
The fallout at the leadership level was swift and decisive. The principal, Brianna Foster Newton, left her position. Assistant Principal Ebony Parker, as we know, resigned even before the school reopened.
And the superintendent?
The superintendent, George Parker III, was voted out by the school board. His removal was effective February 1st, less than a month after the shooting. That kind of rapid, top-level house cleaning really signals the district acknowledging, implicitly at least, the massive systemic failures that happened on their watch.
And when the school physically reopened at the end of January 2023, what changed on the ground? What new safety measures were put in place?
They implemented several significant changes aimed directly at preventing a recurrence. 2 permanent school security officers were assigned to Richneck.
Metal detectors.
Yes. 2 metal detectors were installed for screening. They also added new doors to control access within the building, closing off previously open areas. And, maybe most visibly,
Clear backpacks.
mandatory clear backpacks for all students. It's a package of measures suggesting they realized random screening wasn't enough, especially when specific real-time intelligence from staff, like in Zwerner's case, had been tragically disregarded.
So if we pull the lens back now, what did this whole horrific event mean for the bigger picture? The national conversation about school safety, gun violence. How did leaders and experts react?
Well, just as the Newport News mayor, Philip Jones, predicted, it immediately became a national talking point. He called it a red flag for our country. And the reactions really fell along familiar lines regarding prevention strategies.
Different groups focusing on different solutions.
Exactly. You had Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, making a strong call for government action, specifically focused on keeping guns out of schools entirely.
And gun violence prevention groups.
They also weighed in. The Giffords Law Center, for instance, specifically criticized Virginia at the time for lacking laws that require secure storage of firearms in homes. That was obviously highly relevant here, given how the child got the gun.
And on the other side of the debate,
Virginia's governor at the time, Glenn Youngkin, took a different tack. While acknowledging the tragedy, he stated his view that Virginia already possessed some of the toughest gun laws. His focus was more on needing harsher criminal sentencing generally and boosting mental health care resources to address underlying causes of violence.
So the incident kind of forced everyone to confront multiple issues at once.
It really did. Because the shooter was so young, you couldn't just focus on one thing. It inevitably brought up gun access, parental responsibility, the state of mental and behavioral health services for children, and maybe most pointedly in this specific case, the failures of administrative preparedness and institutional response to known threats.
And it's chilling to remember this wasn't entirely without precedent, even if extremely rare. We mentioned the Kayla Rowland case from 2000.
Right, committed by another 6-year-old. It shows this specific vulnerability, however uncommon, isn't entirely new.
And disturbingly, the issue didn't even stop with the Zwerner shooting in that area, did it?
No. The sources point out that just over a month later, on February 16, 2023, there was another incident in Virginia where a different 6-year-old brought a gun to school.
Resulting in charges for the parent again.
Yes, that child's mother was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor and allowing access to a loaded firearm. It seems the message about adult responsibility for gun access was being hammered home legally, in the Commonwealth right around that time.
Okay, so this deep dive into the Abby Zwerner case, it's given us a lot to process, a huge amount of critical information. What
Yeah.
seems fundamentally clear, though, is this wasn't just some random, unavoidable tragedy.
Absolutely not. It was the direct catastrophic consequence of documented specific warnings that were repeatedly ignored, a profound failure of institutional duty that led straight to severe harm.
And the legal system, in response, carved out pathways for accountability.
Yes, quite significant ones. We saw the dual criminal sentences for the mother, Dejair Taylor, as the gun owner. We saw the crucial legal victory overcoming the workers' comp defense, and ultimately the $10 million civil verdict against the administrator, Ebony Parker, plus the criminal charges she faced. It established clear lines of accountability for both individual negligence and institutional failure.
And for you listening, this whole deep dive really throws those institutional friction points into sharp relief. You see where standard policies, things like metal detectors, completely failed because the human element, the real-time concerns from staff on the ground, was ignored.
That breakdown in communication, in trust, in responsiveness, it had devastating consequences for Abby Zwerner's health, her life, her career.
Which leaves us with a really difficult question to reflect on, doesn't it? It builds directly on everything we've discussed.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Given the very severe and arguably justified legal consequences that both the mother and the former administrator faced for their failures, how do we as a society balance that necessary push for accountability in these extreme safety failures?
With the undeniable ethical and legal complexities of dealing with violence carried out by a child so young, a 6-year-old whose moral compass and understanding are, by definition, still developing.
Exactly. That tension between holding adults and institutions responsible for catastrophic failures and figuring out how to respond justly and effectively to violence by very young children, that's the core, unresolved challenge this case forces us all to confront.